to take account of in this economy to start something that's of value? Shadrach first, please.
Thank you kindly. Back in 2020, one of the global experts within my proximity said something like this about COVID and digitization. They said COVID it has triggered or caused 2030 to arrive in 2020. What does that mean? It means as far as the marketplace or the workplace is concerned, there are certain milestones that Africa, the US, Canada, China, and of course, Switzerland and other localities, we might have reached those levels of digitization or those levels of job insecurity in 2030. But thanks partially to COVID, it has kind of like brought a hyper digitization. Let me qualify that statement. By 2025 in South Africa, there's about 5.7 million jobs that will no longer be relevant. That's a South African situation. By 2025, there are at least 5.7 million jobs that will not be relevant anymore, meaning you are qualified, you are certified, you are experienced, but the job market is saying we prefer a robot over you. Maybe that's a scenario that you had to maybe worry yourself about in 2030, but COVID, thanks to COVID, partially thanks but no thanks, COVID has brought that milestone or brought that gauntlet forward. So maybe if you are considering a side hustle, or even as what Greg said, a second or a third job, it might be a good time for you to not just look at your personal cash flow, but look at the market forces around you, that somebody is moving the cheese. Somebody is innovating, and they might be innovating you right out of your job. So be proactive, don't be reactive. I thought about a certain thought leading up to this conversation or the family meeting. I thought about it. People are often saying robots are coming for your job, and COVID has kind of like caused robots to come to your job for your job faster. Then I thought about it. Wait a minute. If robots are coming for your job, there's a recent startup in Nigeria that has now made unicorn status and is now worth $2 billion because they raised about $400 million in the last couple of weeks. Nigeria is bubbling with startup inventions and innovations. Not all of them are becoming unicorn. Some of them are just managing to enter the market, and with the staying power that Greg referred to, they're able to stay in the game. So all good for that. So the question is, instead of a robot coming for your job, wouldn't you want to start a startup that takes advantage of digitization? And instead of a robot coming for your job, wouldn't you want a robot to work for you? So it's a bit of a sweet deal, isn't it? A robot was coming for your job yesterday, but today you are employing human beings and robots in whatever startup that you may be starting after this conversation that propels you beyond the wall. So that's what I want you to keep in mind, that yes, COVID is a macro attack on governments, on startups, on corporates. Nobody is safe. Nobody is safe. But it's not just an attack, but it's pushing us to the edge of a cliff. My question is, are we going to take flight, or are we going to fall down into the abyss? Thank you kindly.
Thank you very much, Shadrach. That's beautiful. The realities are staring us in the face, and we have to be proactive in taking advantage of the situation. So, Greg, please could you speak to that as well? What should we be thinking about in terms of startups in this post-COVID era?
I think Shadrach hit the nail on the head in terms of the effect, the practical effect of COVID, which has accelerated a lot of the technology trends, and it has increased risk. It has created risk where there previously was not risk. For example, in the U.S., we have our supply chain in the U.S. in the last 20 years has been built around something called just in time. Whereas if you're a manufacturing company and you need a component you order the component on Monday morning, and on Tuesday morning it arrives at the factory. That's called just in time. You're getting it from your supplier. Well, what COVID has done, it has completely screwed up the supply chain. So where you have this starting and stopping of different businesses in the supply chain, now you have a manufacturing business that is completely structured around just in time, where you don't have to hold inventory, and now your supplier will take 2 weeks to get you something. Well, you know what? And you've got to change your entire mode of doing business. And again, there's certain economies in Africa where that's just a problem. You don't get it just in time. And so, but your business structure isn't built around that, right? So you have to, that is completely changed. I think what Shadrach is hitting on is self-awareness. Okay. In the sense of let's take the person in a job. And you're going to get replaced maybe by a robot or artificial intelligence or something like that. You have to be aware. You come into work in the morning, you have to be aware of where the company is going, where your industry is going, and what the trends are. And you have to see, you're on a beach, it's sunny right now, you see storm clouds. You have to look up from the sandcastle and be able to see the storm clouds, and you have to be able to plan ahead. Okay. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to get into technology. There's some people that it's like, they're not tech people. They're not going to be tech people for whatever reason. That's okay. But if you're good at what you do, if you have knowledge, if you have a built-up knowledge, which you always have to work on getting, if you understand that customer, whether you're in a business or you're running your own business, you have a role to play somewhere because of that knowledge, because of that capability to create products and services that serve that customer. And so again, I'm beating this into the ground because this is the key to always having a job and always being what I call market relevant. You have to be relevant to the market. Okay, so that's the first thing. As far as starting a business, I think, and I would say this is true of anybody running a business, is that you have to understand your entire supply chain. Okay, from if you Kenneth have a client that makes hibiscus tea. Okay, so she has to understand she has to have an awareness and a complete understanding from here's my grower making the hibiscus. And here's how it's going to get shipped. Here's how the hibiscus flower is going to get shipped. And here's how I'm going to purchase it. And here's how I'm going to store it. And so now those steps in that delivery chain, and that is something that is manufactured, but it applies completely to a service business. You have to understand now COVID has changed perhaps, the timing of how that hibiscus flower gets delivered, or the issues related to moving it across national borders, or the issues related to currency, okay? And so you have to sit there and look at the risk profile of each of those steps and how it's changed. And when let's say you were working in a company that made hibiscus tea, okay? And you had one role. Let's say your role was to actually brew the tea. You might not be thinking about all those other different steps because there's other people thinking about those steps, but now you go on your own. Now you have to have not an awareness and understanding, and you have to be able to mitigate whatever risk. And so you have to sit there and not just say, can I get the hibiscus flower today? But can I get it tomorrow? What happens if the national borders get shut down? There's a war, which obviously you have issues with that in different parts of Africa. Or I can't get the quality of flour I want for some reason, or the price of fertilizer for the farmer goes up because of inflation, and my costs are going to go up. And so that is something that COVID has made more complicated. And so where you would have taken for granted certain parts of your supply chain being able to deliver what you need, now it's more complicated, and that's just a reality. And so you have to have an awareness. And so what does that mean? Once again, it does not mean you guess. What you think is really irrelevant. You go and you think. Here's the key. You think like the fellow growing the flowers. Okay, you put yourself in that person's shoes and say, what is that person's strategy? And you put yourself in mentally, and you talk to them, not just, okay, well, I'm going to talk to them. Can they deliver the flower? But you get to know them. And that way you also develop a really, really good understanding and appreciation of how you make a better product, how you get the product cheaper, how you improve the chain. And you might say, it's a lot of work, but it's a habit. And most people running businesses don't think like that. And so that COVID has made that a reality, and where you need to understand the risks. You need to really understand the risks of the components. And that's just the new reality that we're in.
Great. I thank you for that, Greg. I mean, the impact, I like that of analysis, supply chain. Interesting that what it's like an equalizer, so to speak. So in the US, what used to come just in time has to now take the same 2 weeks that it takes in Africa. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, because but the problem is we expect it.
Yeah, exactly.
A business that isn't holding inventory. And now what do I need to do? I need to add inventory. Well, that changes my cash flow. It changes my business. It changes my pricing. And you add to that the inflation that we're starting to have in the U.S. And you guys might say, 4%, 5% inflation, not a problem. Well, it's a problem if you've built your business around 2% inflation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, you have to.
Are putting a demand on you based on the realities of the world. Thank you for that. That is so much insight happening here. And like I said, it's getting quite hot. Thank you, King Saxon. Thank you. I think I saw Olatunji earlier. Much appreciated. Now that's amazing. It's been such an engaging conversation today. It's been such an engaging conversation. I think more people need to listen in